The rain falls upon Prague like whispered prayers in a forgotten language, each droplet carrying with it the weight of centuries that have passed through these narrow streets, where cobblestones shine like scattered coins beneath the amber glow of lanterns that swing gently in the night wind. Here, in this city of spires and secrets, where the Vltava River moves with the patience of time itself through arches that have witnessed the rise and fall of emperors, the darkness settles over medieval facades like a cloak woven from memory and shadow. Through lanes that wind between buildings whose stones remember the footsteps of alchemists and astronomers, merchants and mystics, the night air carries sounds that speak of a city breathing in its sleep. The distant toll of cathedral bells marks hours that flow like water through the fingers of those who try to hold them. While somewhere in the maze of ancient streets, water drips from gutters carved by craftsmen whose names have been worn away by weather and forgetting. The fog that rises from the river spreads through courtyards and under archways like the ghost of old Prague itself, transforming familiar landmarks into mysterious shapes that exist at the border between reality and dream. High above the sleeping city, in a workshop carved from the stone bowels of an astronomical clock tower that has measured time's passage for 3 centuries, Master Aurelius Novak tends to mechanisms whose complexity rivals the movement of stars themselves. At 74 years, his body carries the accumulated weight of decades spent in service to precision that demands perfection measured in fractions of seconds. His spine curved from countless hours bent over workbenches where gears and springs await the touch of hands that have learned to speak in the language of metal and motion. His fingers, stained permanently with oil and marked by small scars that tell stories of springs released at unexpected moments and brass edges that demand respect, move with the deliberate care of one who understands that time itself depends upon the proper function of components so small that their failure might pass unnoticed by all but those who listen to the heartbeat of mechanical souls. The lamplight that illuminates his work creates pools of golden warmth in a space where shadows gather like apprentices watching a master demonstrate techniques that cannot be learned from books, but must be absorbed through patient observation and careful practice. The workshop itself breathes with the accumulated presence of generations of clockmakers who have maintained the great mechanism that governs the daily life of Prague, through its regulation of commerce and worship, agriculture and governance that require synchronization possible only when human craft serves divine order through mechanical precision. Every surface bears the patina of dedicated service, workbenches worn smooth by elbows that supported the weight of concentration required for assembling components whose tolerances allow no margin for error. Walls blackened by smoke from oil lamps that have burned through countless nights when urgent repairs demanded attention that could not wait for daylight's convenience. Tonight, as rain drums against windows that frame views of a city wrapped in mist and lamplight, Aurelius performs the ritual maintenance that keeps the great clock's heart beating with regularity that citizens take for granted as naturally as sunrise and sunset. Each gear requires inspection for signs of wear that could disrupt timing relationships, calibrated through centuries of adjustment and refinement, while springs must be wound according to schedules that distribute mechanical stress evenly across components designed to function continuously for decades without replacement that would require knowledge possessed by fewer craftsmen with each passing generation. The oil that lubricates bearing surfaces must be applied with precision that prevents excess accumulation while ensuring adequate protection against friction that wears away metal surfaces with imperceptible persistence that only becomes apparent when damage has progressed beyond repair. His movements as he tends these mechanical organs follow patterns established through 50 years of nightly devotion that has transformed professional obligation into spiritual practice. Each gesture informed by understanding that extends beyond technical knowledge into realms where craft approaches reverence for forces that govern both mechanical and cosmic order. Time is not what clocks measure. He whispers to gears that listen with the attention that only inanimate objects can provide to human voices seeking confession or comfort from companions that judge neither failure nor success, but respond only to the quality of care they receive. Clocks measure intervals between moments that matter, spaces between heartbeats where life happens while we are busy counting seconds and forgetting that each tick brings us closer to silence we have not learned to hear. His voice carries the weight of solitude accumulated through years when the guild that once filled these workshops with apprentices and journeymen, masters and teachers, gradually diminished through forces that transformed medieval craftsmanship into obsolescence, despite the obvious superiority of handmade precision over mass-produced approximation. The younger generation seeks employment in trades that offer more reliable income and less demanding preparation, leaving ancient skills to die with masters who take their knowledge to graves that offer no opportunity for transmission to hands willing to accept the discipline that true mastery requires. The memory of his father's workshop, located in a building that no longer exists beneath streets that have been widened to accommodate traffic unknown to previous generations, brings both comfort and melancholy as Aurelius recalls lessons learned through observation more than instruction, understanding absorbed through daily exposure to standards that admitted no compromise with mediocrity. Aurelius Novak had been a craftsman whose reputation extended throughout the Habsburg Empire. His clocks sought by nobility and clergy who understood that timepieces created by master hands possessed qualities that mechanical reproduction could never achieve, despite advantages of cost and speed that appealed to customers who measured value through immediate utility rather than long-term excellence. "Watch the metal speak," his father had said, while demonstrating techniques for reading the grain structure that determined how brass would respond to forming operations that shaped raw material into components capable of precise movement under stress that would test their design for generations. Each piece tells us how it wishes to be worked, what forces it can accept, and what pressures will cause failure that ruins months of careful labor. The craftsman learns to listen with hands that understand what eyes cannot see, to feel vibrations that reveal internal structures that determine external behavior. Those early lessons had seemed mystical when first encountered by a boy whose understanding of metalworking extended no further than watching sparks fly from grinding wheels operated by journeymen whose skill appeared magical in its ability to transform rough castings into polished components that fit together with precision measured in thousandths of inches. Yet years of practice had revealed the practical foundation underlying apparently supernatural achievements. The accumulated knowledge that allowed experienced craftsmen to predict material behavior through tactile evaluation that no amount of theoretical study could provide without hands-on experience guided by masters who understood how traditional techniques addressed problems that modern methods had not yet learned to solve effectively. The astronomical clock whose mechanism surrounds his workshop, with its complex arrangements of wheels and escapements, calendars and planetaria, represents the culmination of medieval understanding about relationships between celestial and terrestrial order that governed both natural phenomena and human affairs according to principles that required mechanical expression to make cosmic influences accessible to practical application. The multiple dials that display not merely hours and minutes, but also the positions of sun and moon, the phases of zodiacal influence, the movements of planets whose configurations determine favorable times for planting and harvesting, Marriage and travel, diplomatic negotiations, and military campaigns embody knowledge that connects individual daily decisions to cosmic patterns that operate according to rhythms too vast for human comprehension, yet intimate enough to affect every aspect of earthly existence. Maintaining these complex displays requires understanding that extends far beyond mechanical repair into realms where astronomy and astrology, mathematics and mysticism converge in pursuit of knowledge that serves both practical and spiritual purposes through accurate representation of celestial relationships that govern terrestrial affairs according to correspondences established by divine wisdom that medieval craftsmen sought to honor through mechanical precision that reflected heavenly order in earthly materials. Each component must be adjusted not merely for mechanical accuracy, but for symbolic correctness that ensures proper representation of cosmic influences that determine the quality of time itself, according to principles that modern chronometry ignores, despite its technical superiority in measuring duration, without regard for qualitative differences between favorable and unfavorable moments. The sound of footsteps on wet cobblestones below his window draws attention to late travelers making their way through streets that transform after midnight into networks of shadow and reflected light, where ordinary citizens yield dominion to those whose business requires darkness for its proper conduct. The echo of boots against stone creates rhythms that speak of purpose rather than leisure, urgency that contrasts with the measured pace that characterizes most nighttime movement through districts where residents sleep secure in assumptions about safety, that daylight reinforces through visibility that makes surveillance possible by authorities whose presence maintains order through observation more than intervention. Prague at night reveals aspects of its character that daylight obscures. The interplay of artificial illumination and natural darkness, creating atmospheric conditions that transform familiar architecture into mysterious landscapes where history becomes palpable presence rather than mere academic subject. The shadows cast by buildings whose construction spans centuries create temporal layers that allow imagination to populate empty streets with figures from earlier epochs when different priorities and different fears shaped daily life, according to patterns that left traces in stone foundations and architectural details that speak to those who understand the language of craft, practiced in service of beauty as well as utility. Through his window, Aurelius can see the spires of St. Vitus Cathedral rising against clouds that reflect the amber glow of street lamps with light that seems to emanate from within stone itself. Architectural prayer offered in permanently crystallized form that continues its spiritual function regardless of whether human voices join the silent hymn that Gothic proportions sing to heaven through mathematical relationships that translate divine harmony into visible form, accessible to earthly eyes, trained to recognize sacred geometry embedded in everyday structures. The site provides comfort that transcends religious conviction to touch realms where aesthetic experience approaches spiritual understanding through appreciation of beauty that serves no purpose beyond its own perfect existence. The workshop contains tools that represent generations of accumulated wisdom about metalworking techniques refined through centuries of application to problems that demanded solutions achievable only through patient experimentation, guided by understanding that bridged theoretical knowledge and practical skill. Hand-forged files whose teeth have been shaped through hammering, that created cutting surfaces superior to any mass-produced alternative rest beside measuring devices, whose accuracy depends upon calibration, maintained through procedures that require knowledge possessed by craftsmen, willing to invest years in mastering techniques that serve excellence rather than mere adequacy. Each implement carries the marks of use by hands that understood proper employment in service of standards that admitted no compromise with expediency despite economic pressures that favored speed over quality in markets where customers could not distinguish between genuine craftsmanship and skillful imitation. The great mechanism that surrounds his workshop operates with sounds that have become as familiar as his own heartbeat. The complex symphony of escapement clicks and gear mesh that creates acoustic signature unique to this particular clock. Despite similarity to other astronomical timepieces throughout Europe that share common principles while expressing individual character through variations in design and execution that reflect the personalities of masters who created them. Tonight, these familiar sounds carry undertones that speak of adjustments needed to compensate for wear patterns that accumulate despite careful maintenance, subtle changes in timing relationships that require correction through procedures that demand understanding unavailable to any craftsman currently living within traveling distance of Prague. The loneliness that accompanies this recognition extends beyond personal isolation to encompass cultural tragedy that sees essential knowledge disappearing through neglect rather than active destruction. Traditions dying not through persecution, but through indifference that treats inherited wisdom as obsolete burden rather than invaluable resource that connects contemporary problems to solutions developed through generations of accumulated experience. The young men who might once have sought apprenticeship in skills that connected them to lineages extending back through centuries of dedicated service now pursue opportunities that offer immediate rewards without demanding years of preparation that traditional crafts require for competence, that approaches the standards that masters consider minimally acceptable for professional practice. Rumors that reach his isolated workshop through visitors who climb the narrow stairs connecting his mechanical sanctuary to streets where ordinary life proceeds according to rhythms unrelated to astronomical precision speak of tensions building within the city's political structure, conflicts between traditional authorities and newer forms of power that measure legitimacy through different standards and serve different purposes than those that created the ordered society within which craftsmen like himself have flourished through protection, that recognized cultural value in activities that served beauty and accuracy rather than immediate practical utility. These reports remain vague and contradictory, filtered through multiple retellings that emphasize different aspects according to the concerns and biases of those who transmit information that may or may not reflect actual developments in affairs that affect institutions and individuals, according to patterns that resist prediction by those who lack access to decision-making processes that operate beyond the reach of ordinary observation. Yet something in the atmosphere suggests changes approaching with the inevitability of weather fronts, whose effects cannot be prevented, though they might be anticipated by those trained to read signs that precede major shifts in conditions that affect every aspect of daily existence. The quality of conversations overheard in markets and taverns has shifted toward topics that previous generations would have considered unsuitable for public discussion, while official pronouncements carry undertones that speak of authorities preparing responses to challenges that have not yet manifested themselves in forms that admit direct confrontation through conventional means. Standing before the great wheel that regulates the passage of hours through mechanical precision that connects earthly timekeeping to celestial movements, that govern cosmic order according to divine plan that encompasses both natural and human affairs. Aurelius feels within his aging frame the accumulated weight of responsibility that has grown heavier with each passing year as the knowledge required for maintaining such mechanisms becomes concentrated in fewer hands, while the number of those who understand their cultural significance diminishes through forces that favor innovation over preservation, despite obvious advantages that proven techniques offer over experimental alternatives whose long-term reliability remains undemonstrated through practical application under demanding conditions. The rain that began as gentle mist has intensified into steady precipitation that creates acoustic backdrop for contemplative work that requires concentration uninterrupted by external distractions. Its rhythm against windows, providing natural metronome that synchronizes human activity with atmospheric processes that operate according to patterns too complex for complete prediction, yet stable enough to support agricultural and commercial planning that depends upon seasonal reliability despite variations that require constant adaptation to changing conditions. The sound speaks of continuity that transcends individual existence to connect present moment and to cycles that have sustained life through countless generations of struggle and achievement, failure and success that contribute to ongoing human story, whose ultimate meaning remains hidden, though its immediate chapters provide purpose sufficient for daily dedication to tasks that serve beauty and truth, regardless of whether their cosmic significance becomes apparent to those who perform them. Tonight, as moisture condenses on workshop windows, in patterns that create temporary art through processes that operate according to physical principles that connect microscopic molecular behavior to macroscopic visual effects that please aesthetic sense, through appreciation of beauty that emerges from natural order without requiring human intervention for its manifestation. Aurelius moves through familiar routines that maintain mechanical precision while preserving cultural traditions that connect contemporary Prague to medieval achievements that established foundations for civilization, that values accuracy and beauty as essential rather than optional characteristics of human environments designed to support flourishing rather than mere survival. And tonight, as the rain brushes the tower walls, Aurelius feels a small tremor inside the gears, something he cannot name, yet cannot ignore. The tremor moves through brass and iron like a whisper passing through cathedral stone, barely perceptible, yet unmistakably present to hands that have spent half a century learning to read the subtle language that mechanical souls speak through vibration and resistance, harmony and discord. Aurelius places his palm against the main drive wheel, feeling through calloused skin the irregular pulse that disrupts timing relationships calibrated through generations of patient adjustment. A disturbance so slight that any other craftsman might dismiss it as imagination born of late hours and failing eyesight, yet profound enough to threaten the entire mechanism's stability if allowed to progress uncorrected. The investigation requires procedures that transform workshop into laboratory, where scientific method serves intuitive understanding accumulated through decades of intimate communion with machines whose behavior has become as familiar as the rhythm of his own breathing. He traces the tremor's path through interconnected assemblies of wheels and pinions, escapements and pendulums that translate rotational energy into regulated motion according to principles that govern both celestial mechanics and earthly timekeeping. His fingertips detecting variations in surface temperature and texture that reveal stress concentrations invisible to visual inspection, yet crucial to proper function. Each component receives individual attention that acknowledges its role within the larger organism that lives and breathes through mechanical processes more reliable than biological ones, yet equally vulnerable to disruption when critical elements fail to perform their designated functions according to specifications that allow no margin for error. The great clock operates as symphony orchestra, where every instrument must maintain precise relationships with all others to create harmony that serves purposes extending far beyond mere temporal measurement into realms where accuracy becomes moral imperative that connects human craft to divine order through mechanical precision that reflects cosmic perfection in earthly materials. Moving through passages carved from stone that has supported this tower through centuries of political upheaval and architectural modification, Aurelius follows pathways known only to masters who have inherited responsibility for maintaining mechanisms too complex for casual understanding, yet too important for neglect, that would allow deterioration to proceed without intervention by hands trained to recognize problems before they progress beyond possibility of correction. The tremor seems to emanate from deep within the tower's structural core, where primary drive mechanisms transfer energy from weights that descend according to gravitational forces that provide motive power for clockwork that measures intervals between moments when Prague awakens and sleeps, conducts business and celebrates festivals, mourns losses and celebrates achievements according to schedules that depend upon accurate timekeeping for their proper coordination. The city below spreads through fog and rain like manuscript illumination painted in amber and shadow. Its narrow streets and bridge approaches creating patterns that speak of organic growth, guided by practical necessity, rather than geometric planning that characterizes newer districts where uniformity serves administrative convenience over architectural beauty. From his elevated position within the tower's mechanical heart, Aurelius can observe how Prague settles into rhythms that have governed urban life since medieval foundations were laid according to principles that balanced commerce with contemplation, security with accessibility, tradition with innovation, according to proportions that created environments conducive to human flourishing rather than mere economic efficiency. Tavern windows glow with warmth that pushes back against darkness, while creating pools of social activity where merchants and craftsmen, scholars and students gather to share news and gossip, professional concerns and personal celebrations that weave individual lives into community fabric that provides support during difficulties while amplifying joys through collective participation. The conversations that flow within these illuminated spaces carry the accumulated wisdom of generations who have faced similar challenges while developing solutions that serve immediate needs without compromising long-term cultural values that distinguish civilized society from mere survival-oriented existence. Guards patrol routes that connect strategic points throughout the city according to patterns designed to provide security while minimizing interference with legitimate activities that require protection rather than surveillance. Their lanterns creating moving points of light that trace geometric forms across urban landscape like constellation patterns projected onto terrestrial plane. Their presence represents authority that maintains order through visible demonstration of organized force balanced by restraint that recognizes citizen rights while preserving governmental prerogatives that serve public welfare through enforcement of laws that protect individual liberty within frameworks that promote social harmony. Yet tonight, these familiar sights carry undertones that speak of changes approaching through processes that operate beyond the reach of municipal authority or citizen influence. Transformations that will test every institution's capacity to preserve essential functions while adapting to circumstances that no amount of traditional wisdom has prepared contemporary leadership to address adequately. The quality of light itself seems different, as if atmospheric conditions were responding to pressures that affect both meteorological and political climates, according to connections that resist scientific explanation, yet influence human affairs through mechanisms too subtle for conscious recognition by those who experience their effects without understanding their causes. Memory carries him back 30 years to workshops where master craftsmen gathered during guild assemblies that combined professional education with spiritual fellowship, their discussions revealing how mechanical precision served purposes that transcended immediate commercial applications to touch realms where human skill honored divine creativity through collaborative efforts that elevated craft beyond mere technical competence into expressions of reverence for order that govern both natural phenomena and human affairs, according to principles accessible to those willing to dedicate lifetimes to their investigation and application. The guild rituals that had once provided framework for transmission of knowledge from masters to apprentices had emphasized connections between earthly work and cosmic purpose, ceremonies that transformed routine instruction into sacred obligation that bound generations of craftsmen to standards that served beauty and truth rather than merely functional adequacy or commercial success. The tools blessed during these observances had acquired significance that extended beyond their mechanical utility to embody spiritual commitment that elevated their users above ordinary workers into brotherhood, that shared responsibility for maintaining cultural traditions, that connected contemporary practice to ancestral wisdom, preserved through lineages that traced their origins to legendary founders whose achievements established foundations upon which subsequent development could build safely. Johannes Kepler, the court astronomer whose mathematical discoveries had revolutionized understanding of planetary motion while confirming ancient intuitions about cosmic harmony expressed through numerical relationships that governed both celestial mechanics and musical intervals, had visited this very workshop during investigations that required precise mechanical computation of orbital parameters that existing mathematical techniques could calculate but not demonstrate through physical models that made abstract relationships comprehensible to minds that learned through manipulation of actual objects rather than purely intellectual analysis. His presence had transformed routine maintenance work into collaborative inquiry that revealed how clockwork mechanisms could serve scientific research, while scientific understanding improved clockwork accuracy through feedback relationships that benefited both practical timekeeping and theoretical astronomy. The conversation that had developed during those productive months had explored questions about time itself, whether intervals measured by clocks corresponded to actual cosmic rhythms or merely provided convenient conventions that allowed human activities to proceed according to schedules that served social coordination without necessarily reflecting deeper realities about temporal flow that operated according to principles that mechanical devices could approximate but never perfectly embody. These discussions had revealed how apparently simple questions about accuracy and precision opened into philosophical territories where practical concerns merged with metaphysical speculation that challenged assumptions about relationships between human perception and objective reality that existed independently of conscious observation, yet remained accessible only through consciousness that could recognize patterns too complex for mechanical analysis, despite dependence upon mechanical aids for their initial detection. Footsteps echo through streets made treacherous by rain that transforms cobblestone surfaces into mirrors that reflect lamplight in patterns that create optical illusions, where solid ground appears liquid, while actual water pools become invisible hazards for travelers who depend upon visual navigation through urban landscape. That daylight renders familiar, but darkness transforms into maze where wrong turns lead to districts where strangers are not welcome, and questions receive answers that create more problems than they solve. The sounds speak of purposes that require concealment from authorities, whose surveillance extends throughout daylight hours but relaxes during periods when legitimate activities diminish, while illegitimate ones increase according to schedules that acknowledge mutual accommodation between official power and unofficial influence, that maintains social stability through arrangements that neither law nor custom adequately describes, yet both recognize as necessary for practical governance of human communities too complex for simple rule application. Through his workshop window, Aurelius observes delegations whose composition suggests official business conducted outside normal administrative channels, their movements coordinated according to plans that require precise timing despite apparent casualness that would deflect attention from observers who might report unusual activities to superiors whose responses could disrupt carefully laid preparations for actions whose nature remains unclear, though their importance seems sufficient to justify risks that prudent individuals would normally avoid. The sight creates unease that transcends personal concern, to encompass institutional anxiety about changes that could affect traditional relationships between guild autonomy and governmental oversight, according to policies that favor centralized control over local discretion that has historically protected crafts requiring specialized knowledge for their proper regulation. Earlier that week, visitors whose credentials identified them as representatives of imperial administration had requested information about workshop operations and training procedures that seemed to extend beyond routine inspection into territories where professional competence intersected with political reliability, according to criteria that traditional guild evaluation had never considered relevant to mechanical accuracy or artistic achievement. Their questions had probed not merely technical capabilities, but also philosophical orientations and social associations that might indicate susceptibility to influences that authorities deemed potentially dangerous to public order. Despite obvious benefits that intellectual diversity provided for advancing human knowledge through collaborative investigation of problems that resisted solution by any single perspective or methodological approach, the implications of such official interest extended far beyond immediate inconvenience to threaten fundamental assumptions about relationships between skilled craft and political authority that had protected workshops like his from interference that could disrupt delicate processes requiring years of patient development before achieving results worthy of public recognition. The suggestion that mechanical competence might be subordinated to ideological conformity represented challenge to principles that had governed guild operations since medieval foundations established frameworks for preserving and transmitting knowledge that served cultural purposes, transcending immediate political considerations, while remaining compatible with legitimate governmental interests in maintaining social stability through institutions that promoted excellence rather than merely preventing disorder. Standing before the astronomical display, whose complex arrangements of wheels and indicators represent centuries of accumulated observation translated into mechanical form that makes celestial relationships accessible to earthly planning that depends upon accurate prediction of seasonal changes and lunar phases that govern agricultural activities and commercial ventures throughout the region, Aurelius contemplates how individual dedication to precision serves communal purposes that extend far beyond personal satisfaction or professional reputation to touch realms where human effort participates in cosmic order through activities that honor divine creativity while serving practical needs that connect spiritual aspiration to material necessity through work that dignifies both performer and performance. The great mechanism that surrounds him with its patient clicking and measured rotation embodies principles that govern both mechanical accuracy and moral behavior, precision that reflects commitment to standards that admit no compromise with expediency despite pressures, that favor immediate results over long-term excellence that requires patience and persistence for its achievement. Each component has been crafted according to specifications that demand perfection, achievable only through dedication, that transcends commercial motivation to touch realms where beauty and function merge in expressions of human creativity that serve purposes larger than individual ambition, while remaining dependent upon individual excellence for their successful realization. Tonight, the familiar sounds carry variations that speak of adjustments needed throughout the entire system. Subtle changes in resonant frequencies that indicate wear patterns affecting multiple assemblies whose interdependent relationships require simultaneous correction through procedures that demand understanding of the whole mechanism rather than merely its individual parts. The complexity of required interventions approaches limits of what single craftsman can accomplish, despite lifetime preparation, that has developed capabilities unmatched by any contemporary practitioner within reasonable traveling distance of Prague, whose political situation grows increasingly uncertain as imperial policies shift toward centralization that threatens local autonomy, traditionally protected by practical necessity for specialized knowledge that distant administrators cannot effectively supervise. Time grows restless. He whispers to gears that listen with attention, that only mechanical souls can provide to human voices, seeking companionship from entities that respond to care rather than conversation, that measure devotion through quality of maintenance rather than eloquence of expression. Something approaches that will test whether centuries of patient craft can survive pressures that recognize no distinction between essential and expendable, between irreplaceable and merely convenient. The rain continues its percussion against tower walls, while fog drifts through streets below like visible manifestation of uncertainty that affects every aspect of daily life through atmospheric conditions that reflect psychological states of population struggling to maintain normal routines while preparing for changes whose exact nature remains unclear, though their approach seems increasingly inevitable. The moisture that condenses on workshop windows creates temporary patterns that dissolve and reform according to temperature variations that respond to both external weather and internal heating provided by oil lamps whose flames create islands of stability in environment where everything else seems subject to fluctuations that resist prediction despite apparent regularity, that provides false sense of security for those who mistake temporary patterns for permanent conditions. And somewhere deep within the tower's iron heart, the tremor returns, softer now, but impossibly persistent. The tremor spreads through brass and iron like fever through blood, each component infected with irregularity that disrupts relationships calibrated through centuries of patient adjustment. By midnight, the lunar dial hesitates in its ancient dance, while the zodiac ring shivers between constellations, as if uncertain which celestial influence should govern this particular hour. Aurelius traces the expanding failure through mechanisms that respond to his touch with vibrations that speak of exhaustion more profound than mechanical wear. A weariness that penetrates metal souls grown tired of measuring time for a world that no longer values the precision they offer with such faithful devotion. The great pendulum maintains its rhythm, but with effort now visible to eyes trained to read mechanical distress through subtle variations in arc and tempo that reveal internal struggles invisible to casual observation. Each swing carries less authority than its predecessor, as if the ancient device were slowly forgetting the cosmic dance it has performed for 300 years without pause, its bronze heart growing heavy with accumulated memories of all the moments it has marked, all the hours it has announced to a city that awakened and slept according to schedules its voice made possible. Standing within the tower that has become his entire world, Aurelius feels the building itself breathing with difficulty, stone walls expanding and contracting according to temperature changes that affect metal components through thermal stress that adds mechanical burden to assemblies already strained beyond their original design parameters. The rain that drums against windows creates atmospheric pressure that influences pendulum behavior, while humidity penetrates wooden frames to swell gear teeth beyond tolerances that allow smooth engagement between components whose precise fit determines whether the entire mechanism functions or fails catastrophically. Footsteps echo through the spiral stairway that connects his workshop to the world below, their rhythm familiar. Despite years of absence that had suggested their owner would never return to climb these worn stone steps again. Anna, his brother's daughter, appears in the lamplight like a ghost, made solid by memory and affection. Her presence transforming the mechanical sanctuary into space where human connection bridges generational gaps that seem insurmountable, until actual encounter proves that shared blood carries obligations that time cannot dissolve, despite geographic separation and cultural differences that make communication difficult. "Uncle," she says, removing a cloak dampened by fog that has transformed Prague into dreamscape, where familiar landmarks disappear behind atmospheric veils that make navigation dependent upon memory rather than sight. I felt called to visit tonight, though I cannot explain why the urgency seemed so compelling that I left my family sleeping to walk through streets that sensible people avoid after dark. Her voice carries qualities that remind him of his brother's intonations, family characteristics that persist across generations despite environmental influences that shape individual personality according to circumstances that differ radically from those that formed previous members of bloodlines that maintain identity through inherited traits more powerful than social conditioning. At 28 years, she has achieved success as seamstress, whose work serves wealthy clientele that appreciates handmade excellence despite availability of machine-produced alternatives that offer lower prices at cost of artistic qualities that distinguish craft from mere commodity production designed for mass consumption rather than individual appreciation. The clock grows restless, Aurelius observes, while adjusting weights whose descent provides motive power for mechanisms that translate gravitational force into regulated motion according to principles that connect earthly timekeeping to cosmic order through mechanical precision that reflects divine harmony in material forms accessible to human understanding. Tonight it speaks of changes approaching through processes that no amount of technical skill can prevent, though careful attention might delay their completion until preparations can be made for transitions that seem inevitable despite human preferences for stability over transformation. Together, they examine components whose behavior reveals stress patterns that affect every aspect of clockwork function. Anna's fresh perspective illuminating problems that familiarity had made invisible to eyes that had observed these same mechanisms for decades, without noticing gradual deterioration that proceeded at rates too slow for daily observation, yet fast enough to accumulate into failure modes that threatened structural integrity throughout the entire assembly. Her questions about purpose and meaning behind technical procedures reveal how mechanical knowledge serves purposes that extend beyond mere timekeeping into realms where precision becomes expression of human commitment to standards that honor cosmic order through earthly work that participates in divine creativity. This gear controls lunar phases, he explains, while demonstrating adjustment procedures that require understanding of astronomical relationships, translated into mechanical ratios that must maintain accuracy despite component wear, that affects timing relationships with subtlety that escapes detection until cumulative errors produce visible discrepancies between clockwork predictions and actual celestial behavior. The moon's influence governs tides that affect commerce throughout our region, while its phases determine agricultural schedules that ensure proper timing for planting and harvesting according to cycles that connect earthly productivity to cosmic rhythms that operate independently of human convenience, yet remain accessible to human understanding through patient observation and mechanical computation. The explanation reveals how individual components serve larger purposes that connect personal craft to communal welfare, technical accuracy to cultural survival, mechanical precision to spiritual understanding that recognizes divine order expressed through natural phenomena, that human intelligence can comprehend sufficiently to create practical applications that serve human needs while honoring cosmic principles that govern both material and spiritual dimensions of existence. Each gear and spring embodies knowledge accumulated through generations of craftsmen who understood their work as collaboration between human skill and divine wisdom that enabled earthly activities to proceed in harmony with celestial patterns that provide framework for civilized life. From his workbench drawer, Aurelius removes a small brass compass whose construction demonstrates principles that govern all precision metalworking. its components fitted with tolerances that allow accurate function despite environmental variations that affect materials according to physical laws that craftsmen must understand and accommodate through techniques that serve reliability rather than mere appearance. The instrument represents hours of patient labor guided by standards that admit no compromise with adequacy despite economic pressures that favor speed over quality in markets where customers cannot distinguish between genuine precision and superficial approximation that serves immediate needs while lacking durability required for long-term dependability. Your great-grandfather made this during his apprenticeship, he tells Anna while placing the compass in her hands, with ceremony that acknowledges transfer of responsibility for preserving family heritage that extends beyond mere possession of objects to embrace understanding of values that guided their creation. According to principles that connected individual craft to cultural traditions that provided meaning and purpose for activities that served beauty and truth rather than merely commercial success. It measures directions with accuracy that depends upon proper maintenance of pivot points, whose wear affects performance according to mechanical principles that apply to all precision instruments, regardless of their specific functions or intended applications. The gift carries implications that extend beyond sentimental value to encompass practical education about standards that define excellent work, while providing example of dedication required for achievement that transcends adequate performance to approach perfection achievable only through commitment that serves ideals rather than merely fulfilling obligations imposed by external authorities whose understanding of quality remains limited by lack of direct experience with processes that demand lifetime devotion for their proper mastery. The conversation that follows explores questions about legacy and continuity, about responsibilities that each generation owes to previous and subsequent ones, about ways that essential knowledge survives periods when cultural values shift toward priorities that seem to threaten traditional wisdom. Despite obvious benefits that inherited understanding provides for addressing problems that contemporary innovation cannot solve effectively without foundation provided by accumulated experience transmitted through lineages that preserve practical solutions, alongside theoretical insights that support their successful application. As dawn approaches through fog that transforms sunrise into atmospheric theater, where light emerges gradually through moisture that creates optical effects worthy of artistic appreciation. Despite their natural origin, the great clock's irregularities become more pronounced, its ancient voice speaking with hesitation that reveals mechanical distress too severe for complete correction through adjustments that individual craftsmen can accomplish despite lifetime preparation, that has developed capabilities unmatched by contemporary practitioners, whose training emphasizes speed over precision, according to industrial priorities that measure success through quantity rather than quality of production. The zodiac ring freezes between Sagittarius and Capricorn, while the lunar dial trembles at half phase, celestial mechanics translated into earthly clockwork, struggling to maintain accuracy that connects temporal measurement to cosmic relationships that govern both natural phenomena and human affairs, according to correspondences that medieval understanding recognized through synthesis of astronomical observation and mechanical implementation, that modern science has abandoned despite obvious practical benefits that such integration provides for activities that require coordination between earthly schedules and celestial influences. It cannot continue much longer, Aurelius acknowledges, while performing adjustments that provide temporary relief without addressing fundamental problems that require repairs beyond his current physical capabilities and replacement parts unavailable through suppliers who no longer maintain inventory for mechanisms whose design predates industrial standardization that favors interchangeable components over individually fitted assemblies that achieve superior performance through precision impossible to duplicate through mass production techniques that serve economic efficiency rather than mechanical excellence. The rain intensifies as morning advances, its rhythm against windows creating percussion that synchronizes with failing clockwork to produce complex rhythms that speak of natural forces reclaiming artificial constructions that human intelligence has created to serve purposes that extend beyond immediate survival needs into realms where beauty and precision provide meaning that justifies effort required for their achievement, despite practical difficulties that make their maintenance increasingly challenging as social conditions change toward priorities that question value of preserving traditional knowledge, whose benefits resist quantification through methods that industrial society employs for measuring worth. Standing before the great mechanism that has defined his existence through dedication that transformed professional obligation into spiritual practice, Aurelius contemplates how individual lives serve purposes that transcend personal satisfaction, to connect human effort to cosmic order through activities that honor divine creativity while serving practical needs that ensure community survival and cultural continuity across generations that face different challenges while sharing fundamental requirements for meaning and purpose that make existence valuable beyond mere biological persistence. The clock tower of Prague rises above fog-shrouded streets, where citizens begin their daily activities according to schedules that depend upon temporal coordination that mechanical precision makes possible. Though few among them understand technical complexities involved in maintaining accuracy that serves their needs through invisible dedication of craftsmen whose work occurs beyond public awareness, yet provides essential services that civilized life requires for its proper functioning. The ancient mechanism continues its patient ticking, despite growing irregularities that speak of approaching transition from one era to another. From craft-based precision to industrial approximation that serves economic priorities rather than cultural values, that recognize excellence as worthy goal regardless of commercial considerations. In the fading, irregular heartbeat of the old clock, Prague carries forward memory of dedication that measured worth through quality rather than quantity, through beauty rather than mere utility, through understanding that connected human skill to cosmic order, through mechanical precision that reflected divine harmony in earthly materials shaped by hands, that served purposes larger than individual ambition, while finding fulfillment through work that honored both creator and creation, through patient attention to standards that admitted no compromise with mediocrity, despite pressures that favored expediency over excellence in markets where authentic value competed unsuccessfully against superficial appeal that satisfied immediate desires without providing lasting satisfaction.